What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. For today, I am Sean Murphy, and I am joined by not only one of the best beat writers in the NBA, but one of my favorite people on the internet. He is the co-host of the Bun and Cardigan podcast with my guy, Nick Henkel. He is the Pistons beat writer for The Athletic, and he is one of the only beat writers to be featured on League Fits, my guy, James Edwards III. James, what's going on, man? Good to see you as always.
The only reporter to be on League Fits. Let's clear that up, Sean.
There
Let's
we I listen,
let's
I
let's
didn't
plant the
know.
flag.
I didn't want to offend anyone out there. I didn't know since last time we recorded if anyone else made that leap, but let's be honest, James, you're on a different level. There's no
Uh,
way you have to be the only reporter on League Fits. That just makes
to-
sense.
yeah, I haven't seen anybody else be on since. Certainly is it's up there on the resume for sure. I didn't expect it. Did I hunt it? Did I hunt it a little bit? Maybe, but
Oh,
that's
you
neither.
definitely hunted it, James.
That's
Let's not
that
lie about
They
it.
didn't have to do it though. They didn't have to do it.
That's
They did
true.
it, and nobody could take that away from me.
I mean, you earned it though. Let's not pretend that you like the fit was fire. Like you 100% like you earned that spot. It's not
I
like you were
thought
thrown up
so.
there.
I wouldn't send them some bullshit, like,
Right.
it was I thought it was worthy, and
It
they
was.
agreed, so,
Yeah.
yeah, nobody could take that from me.
Yeah, 100%. And Jay, yeah, and you know what? It's like you might not have been able to like report on like playoff basketball yet, but you're on league fits. So like I feel like that balances out.
I'll take that. That's a win.
James, I'm honored. Thanks so much for being on. Especially like within a week of recording with Sam Vecini, I just don't feel worthy in like any way. So like seriously,
Stop.
dude, thanks so much for coming on the pod. It's good to see you.
Yeah, anytime, man. I'm a big fan of your work and you as a dude, so anytime.
I appreciate that, man. And you know that it's definitely mutual. I always make sure to read what your work whenever it comes out. Always, appreciate the amount of effort that you put in, especially, during seasons like these where, there are only 15 wins when it doesn't go the way that everyone anticipates. I'm just curious, from your end, like you've been, this is kind of the third year in a row where this team's in the bottom of the lottery. You've been in Detroit, kind of in the essentially just through the low points. What has this season felt like in particular? How has it stood out to the rest of the other seasons you've covered?
It's a good question. So yeah, I started Luke Kennard's rookie year, so 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, 21, 22, and we're in 22, 20. So I'll be finishing up my sixth season this year.
So that was Stan's last year,
Yeah,
right?
Stan's last year, and I've been here for all of Dwayne's.
Yep.
Um, it this and so I've only covered one playoff team.
Hmm.
They obviously got swept. I haven't covered a team that's been 500. That playoff team was 41 and 41.
Yep.
Um, I would say this year, for the last 5 years, I felt like I did a good job of from start to finish finding interesting stories and not really running out of ideas. This is the first year I've kind of like I feel like the stories haven't been as kooky or as creative as they used to be toward the
Hmm.
end. Um, I think I come to the realization that like what I was doing prior to this year was hard, and maybe I don't know if it was I don't know if I just feel like it's just been a little bit more draining this year just trying to come up with stuff.
Right.
Just because you can only put lipstick on a pig so many times. And it's not that it's um like unexpected. Like I didn't think they'd be this bad, but I didn't think they'd be a playoff team.
Right.
But certainly just between like Cade being out, um, fans having expectations that kind of didn't match what I had been kind of trying to tell people.
What everyone's been trying what a
Yeah,
lot of people have
yeah,
been trying to
yeah.
tell people.
So I felt like the last 2 years, once they like since the like Killian Sadiq Isaiah draft, like the amount of engagement has been insane. Like people were been super excited the last 3 years. But this year it felt like the engagement's been really good. Thanks to people like yourself, like I've built up a really good audience despite covering a team that, like I said, hasn't won a playoff game my entire time. Um, but certainly, like it feels like people are more agitated and have tuned out sooner, and I get it, especially like now with so many guys out. But
Right.
eh, before it was like the Pistons were like the cute team that's like it's fun to watch them lose tight games, blah blah blah. Now it's like, well, they've been losing tight games for like 3 weeks now, but like nobody cares. They're more annoyed. So it's just like the shift in the fan base has changed, and uh, it is what it is. But certainly, like it's this year, it feels like it's just I don't know. I feel like I've been drained
I mean, the
of it.
story's
Yeah,
easy. Like that's the thing. Like I think it's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like from my perspective, because this is the first full season where, obviously I even though I wear the merch and stuff, like I really more so see this as repping the city at this point. I view my team like the relationship with the Pistons. I really view it as covering the team at this point, especially watching the games like of late. It's definitely more work than it is for pleasure at times. But I would say like for this season, to me, the story is just the reason why it's so difficult to come up with things is because the story has been written for so long now and it's not a complicated one. It's like this season, like you've like kind of like what I've heard you say for a while, like Cade's the straw that stirs the drink. He's the thing that makes everything go in motion. And whatever aspirations and expectations and everything that people came into this season with was right out the window once Cade was on the sideline. But even then, if you go back and look in retrospect, it was never really given a fair chance to begin with because we saw how important guys like Marvin Bagley and Alec Burks were, and having those guys out at the beginning, we had the worst bench in the league for the worst
yeah,
2 weeks. Alec Burks came back in, and we had the top scoring bench for the first 2 months. If you put
yeah,
all those pieces together, I don't think it's a playoff team either, but it's certainly more interesting than what this season's been.
yeah. No, I agree with that. I think people don't understand the importance when you have a young team like this and so many unproven pieces. I don't think people understand just the importance of not even like missing your guys that are even your top 8 guys. Like the Boston can get by if they're missing their 7th or 8th guy because they have 2 elite 1 and 2s and 4 and 5s. But Detroit has a bunch of guys who are still trying to prove themselves. Guys that are still figuring it out, like missing Marvin for that long and even longer because he ended up getting hurt again. And Alec for that long, like that. This team can't afford to not just be like to just be missing NBA players. They don't have a lot of guys who are like proven NBA players. They can't go that much time without them. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that the Pistons went into the season expecting to make the play in. I definitely
Right.
think they thought they'd be better, but they also expected to be because of Cade. And I mean, Cade only played 12 games. The numbers right before he went down speak for themselves. He was starting to get on a tear. But once that happened and they knew he'd be done for the year, that kind of just, I mean, at that point, it was another developmental season, um, more focused on the individuals than it was probably the unit, which would have been the case with Cade.
Right, 100%. And, I think and I think it's, certainly from a fan base perspective, I think also, like as time goes on, it's hard to see, continual losing year after year after year, which I can empathize with, especially, since they haven't won a playoff game since I was 11. But, at the same time, it's like kind of like you said, it's kind of like it's like you understand where they're coming from, but it's like at the same time, when you don't have key NBA players in the lineup, when you don't have key things there, it's hard to see that. And I think for me too, I think it's easier for me to have the perspective of knowing this team is in an okay spot because I do pay so much attention to other, young rebuilding teams. Like I do have a lot of interest in reading on the Houston Rockets situation and what's going on with Steven Silas and everything going on there.
Hmm.
So maybe on that, like, I know we've touched on this a little bit before, but what has been the importance of Dwayne Casey this season to this team staying together, to what this development's been? What's been his role through all of this? And what are some of the things that maybe like fans don't see about like the job of the coaching staff?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think just in terms of always keeping the bigger picture in mind,
Mhm.
giving guys opportunities, making everybody feel like they have a role, which helps keeps them engaged. I think I know it's probably tough to see because the team is losing, but if you really, really look at it, like in terms of development, which is what this season should be about, they've made some great strides. Like
Yeah.
Jaden has gotten better every single month. And Jaden is playing just some tremendous basketball right now. Like that's a kudo to the coaching staff. Um, Isaiah Stewart, I know um, he's out right now, but just to see his growth as not only a 3-point shooter. I mean, he was shooting close to 40% in December, and then obviously went on a cold streak and is at 33. But for a guy that's never shot high volume, that's not a bad number. And then you see him having opportunities to put the ball on the floor when he's getting run off the line. He's getting an opportunity to play a new position. Um, like they're showing belief in these guys that they can do it. And then I mean, you could look at Isaiah Livers opening up a role for him and letting him play 40 minutes a game and figure things out. I mean, we could go down the line. I think the biggest thing is just the development, the empowering that they're giving them. Um, and that's what this season's about. And I think if you watch closely, the players really not only do they believe in Casey's message, but I think there certainly is respect there, and I think they believe in his message and what he's preaching and what him and Troy have been trying to tell the group, and I think it shows because there's been a lot of losing, there hasn't been any blow ups.
Right.
Spirit as somebody who's in the locker room after every game, the spirits aren't. I mean, obviously they're upset when they lose, but the spirits aren't finger pointing and things like that. Like this is a group that's together. Um, this is a group that even if people agree or disagree, that takes the blame for a lot of the downfalls of this team. Like the players take that. I think that's just the epitome of a healthy organization, and that stuff goes a long way. I think, and I remember I've talked to Troy before about this, and he said he knew it would be ugly for the first few years. As I've mentioned on Twitter, I've mentioned in my reporting, like the Pistons didn't have a Paul George to trade to kick off the rebuild. They didn't have a Nikola Vucevic to trade. Like they started from ground zero. The Andre, Blake, and Reggie Jackson, when those three got moved, the Pistons got back John Henson, Brandon Knight, and like 2 second-round picks in cap space. Like that's what their best players were worth.
Right, and that
So
was and if you really look back, that was Ed Stefanski's move to make. Like,
right, exactly.
when Troy came in, the best chips he had on the table were Svi Mikhailuk, Bruce Brown, and Luke Kennard.
And
Like,
the cap space that Ed created, right.
yeah, mhm,
So the starting point was legitimately ground zero. Um, Ed came in and kicked off the rebuild, opening like planting the flag, like this is what's got to happen.
right,
And but Troy said he purposely, like part of his evaluation of guys is guys that could handle this and be able to make it through the quote unquote darkness and see the light. Like he wanted guys that you can see in Houston, like at times, like it looks like there's a lot of stuff, always noise going on with just locker room stuff and all that. You don't hear that in Detroit because Troy wanted to get guys who understood the bigger picture and would be able to handle this. And I think it just, yeah, like I said, it's a testament to having a healthy organization.
yeah. Absolutely, for sure. Speaking of, guys who've really thrived in, like the player development, you brought up Jaden Ivey, another guy who's really, taken a lot of steps over the last 2 years is Hamidou Diallo,
Hmm.
especially from the player that he was when we traded for him to the player that he is now. It's night and day, right?
Yeah.
Um, he is a guy that's essentially out for the season now because of
Mhm.
the ankle sprain that he got against the Portland Trailblazers. He's going to be a free agent this summer. To me, I went into this season, having almost no thoughts about what Hamadou's long-term future in Detroit would look like. And now it's something that I'm thinking about, much more because on one hand, with the things that he showed over this season, I could definitely see a role for him in Detroit long term. But at the same time, if you're talking about like, what the Pistons can get in free agency, like are there upgrades? Like, what are your thoughts on like Hamadou's summer and what that could potentially entail?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty fascinating on that. Obviously, on a middle type of scale. Like,
Yeah.
I think he's more than deserving of a bump in pay, which he was playing the last 2 years. 2 years, 10 million. Um, I think he's even though he hasn't been part of a winning team in Detroit, like I think he's a winning culture type of player.
Mhm.
I think he is similar to Isaiah. Like there's kind of like a heart and soul there with him, in terms of just like the energy and emotion he plays with. And I think like Detroit doesn't like you need kind of like those Swiss Army knives, those guys who can change a game just with heart and hustle and energy. And I even think he's like his intelligence as a player has improved. He's a smart guy, like in real life, like very smart guy, but I think his intelligence on the floor has improved. You see less threes. You see him cutting almost every other possession. You see like he's really looked in the mirror and figured out what's like best for him. And he's just been at a level that's perfect for him in his career, that he's in a role where any team in the NBA would want somebody like that. So the issue is Detroit sees him as a like kind of third, fourth, fifth wing.
Mhm.
Um, and like how much are you willing to pay for that is the question. And do other teams maybe see him as more? And I think Detroit would like to have Hamidou Diallo back. This is just my gut. I just don't know how high on the pecking order that'll be, or the to-do list this summer.
Right.
So maybe there's a world where they're waiting for option A, B, C, D to play out. And if Hamidou's there by the time all that stuff is resolved, then if they would love to bring him back. But I don't know if Hamidou will be there by that time. So it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, Troy loves him, and he's had a very positive impact on a basketball team during a season that, uh, I mean, it's easy to be drained of the type of energy that he plays with on a night in and night out basis, but he continues to provide it. So
Yeah.
uh, just his just his presence, I think, is important to have around. But of course, the age old question is how much is that going to cost?
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. I agree with that 100%. And you brought up Jaden Ivey and what he's been able to do, as this season's got on. Kind of at the beginning of the year, I know a lot of the questions for me kind of were around like how good could he be as a playmaker, in the NBA, which it seems like now like his playmaking is almost one of his strengths.
Hmm.
Now, like towards the end of this season, this was tweeted out by Pistons PR, but this was also in the article that you just released, which by the way, go check out The Athletic and subscribe. Not sponsored, but may as well be. On Monday, on Monday, Ivy became just the fourth rookie in the last 15 years to account for 900 points, 225 rebounds, 250 assists, and 75 three-pointers in the first 60 games of their career, joining Cade Cunningham, Steph Curry, and Luka Doncic. Now, obviously, that doesn't say that he's going to be Steph or Luka, but that's pretty good company to be in, especially through your first 60 games of your career. What do you think has been some of the keys of his development? I mean, for me, it looks like I think part of it has been like the natural, like it looks like the game is slowing down for
Hmm.
him more and more as the year goes on. And I feel like when he's at his best is when he's just playing in the flow of the game and when he's just making reads because he can make some really good reads. But also to me, it looks like he's been much better with using his body and using his threat of his athleticism to open up opportunities for other players too. What are
Yeah,
some of the things that you've noticed?
I think some of those things, like just understanding the games, recognizing the low man, whether there's a kick out, whether he can get to the hole. Like I think that stuff is improved. Just reading the defense, just in totality, I think has been noticeably improved. His change of speeds is, I think, probably actually atop that list. Just not playing 100 miles per hour all the time, being able to go from 30 to 50 to 60 and then 100 is changed a lot of things for him. I still am shocked by how good of a shooter he's been. Not that he's like a world beater by any means, but I mean, he's been shooting close to 38% from three the last month. I just didn't believe in his shot coming in. I thought it would take some time. But he's been, even from the start of the year, he's been a better shooter than I anticipated. And then just to see the growth as a mid-range shooter in season, it's something I see him work on almost every day after practice. Like again, he's the stuff that you've seen him improve at, and that's the thing. I don't know if I try to. That's the one thing I can provide to fans is letting you know like this is stuff. The stuff that you like notice like oh he's gotten better at that is stuff that he's working on every day after practice. Um, the mid range, the change of pace, like that is that being attached on pick and rolls to the ball handler as a defender. Like he's legitimately working on this stuff after practice.
Yeah.
So to see that pay off so quickly is it's kind of a sight to see. It's fascinating. And certainly I've been impressed. He's exceeded my expectations. It's hard to put a ceiling on a guy like that who gets better at a rapid growth, who gets better each month, each week. It's just hard to put a ceiling on a guy like that now. But yeah, I mean, I think he's really really impressed. Obviously, he's still young. There's things that I think at times like he still like he's not dissecting defenses every possession. Like sometimes he forces
Right.
passes, and so like obviously cleaning that up. Um, Shot selection stuff. Like sometimes he doesn't always take the best shot, but um, he'll end up making up for it. And but yeah, I think just in general, just to see the stuff he's worked on after practice throughout the whole year, and these are the things that he's like noticeably gotten better at is it's really encouraging if you're a Pistons fan because I mean it shows that this guy works and not only does he work but like he picks up things quickly and that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely, and, like, I thought the mid-range game would be something that we would see in his 2nd season, so to your point, the fact that, like, he's legitimately getting better at that as the years gone on and is now, like, something that's an arsenal in his game is something that's great. Obviously, he still needs to get better at finishing at the rim. I think that's
Yep.
an adjustment for just about anybody coming into the league. I think sometimes is that I think sometimes he's not even fully aware of how high he can jump or how fast he can be going towards the rim at times. But then also just obviously finishing around NBA bigs and the contact and the physicality that's
Yeah.
in there, but also
Knowing
obviously,
knowing when to challenge too. Like there's just
yeah,
you're not there's some guys you're just not going to be able to finish over.
yeah, like if Mitchell Robinson's down there, like you should probably play a mid range game that night.
Yeah, or a kick out or something. Yeah, like
Yeah,
there's he'll figure that out.
right, 100%, 100%. But also, just like just like you talk about his work ethic, I still think, like the support system he has might be unrivaled in the league, just like with with his mom, but also just with the player development staff and everything that they have there. Like that's a top notch like basketball circle to have, in my
Mhm.
opinion. And
Yeah.
I'm really high on his ceiling too. It's been really fun to watch. Talking about a guy who I'm also really high on, I know you're really high on, Cade Cunningham. I
Mhm.
know he's kind of been out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people this season, but I heard you and Sam Vecini talk about Cade's last 7 games and how awesome he was in year 2. I look in particular those 5 games, the like 5 of those 7 games were against the Bucks, the Hawks, and the Warriors. Like he was going against like some of the best teams in basketball, and
Yeah.
he was like putting up numbers, and he was just looking dominant. And even though he's lost a season on the court as far as like being able to play, it seems like from the reporting you've done, but also just from what I can see from a game to game basis, it looks like Cade Cunningham's by no means taking a season off from like a development standpoint, from like a work standpoint. Like he seems very engaged for a player who's on the sidelines for a season injured. What
Oh, for sure.
has
Yeah.
uh, what do you think have been some of the key things he's done throughout the season? And also, how much has that guy been in the gym? Because good lord, that guy looks like he's gotten big.
Yes. I think I've been trying to tell people, and posted the photo the other day, and I still don't even think it does it justice. Like, I think when people see him in a jersey for the first time, they're gonna realize like how big his upper body got. Like he's been putting in the work. Obviously, like lower body injury for him, so he can only like what else is he gonna do? But to see him take advantage of it, and I think it's encouraging too to see him put on that type of muscle because I think people did have questions with him being vegan if he could get bigger.
Right.
Um, and he's certainly like done that. But yeah, just being engaged, being in meetings, being at every game, talking to guys, being in Ji's ear. He started planting the seed as a leader of this team last summer. His teammates noticed that. His teammates welcome that, and it's carried over even though he hasn't played. He's very much present. Um, he's certainly he's certainly invested in this team, and I think it's not. I mean, it's no more telling than what he's done when he's not on the screen and he's not on the floor. Just how invested he is in this team. Um, and then even that, like he's in a. Hopefully, I'll have a story on this very soon. But he's been working on his shot with John Beeline. They work a lot in almost I think daily. I don't get to see every single day, but it feels like daily when I do see it. I see every other day. So he's just putting in a lot of work. He's continuing kind of to progress on that leadership quality and flag that he planted last summer, and he's involved, man. Like I said, if you were questioned his, if anybody questioned his investment into Detroit and the Pistons, I think this year is really telling because he's making sure he's involved in every way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I could even tell just from like when he came in like on like media day. Like I remember last season like he was like it was a lot more just like that excitement of being a rookie going into his first year like I'm just ready to learn. I'm just excited to go through the process with the guys like like seeing like just from like even from like the outside perspective, not someone that can be there every day. It does seem like there's like much more of that ownership and that onus, to be the leader of the team, but also like there just seems to be this like, just this like confidence and poise and just, especially like in the face of things that are going on throughout the league, like, with like the Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving situation with with everything we've seen with John Morant going on of late and not sure what's gonna happen there. Like I think the Pistons got really fortunate that they got a franchise player like a Cade Cunningham who seems to be so focused on his diet at such a young age, a guy who seems, who wants to, be a franchise player and take over a team at such a young age. Like, what are some of the things about him, like from like that perspective that are just different compared to other players that you've seen?
I think I don't know if people realize like how much that factored into them picking him number one.
Right.
Um, I remember leading into the draft, and I wrote a couple pieces that it wasn't a given Cade was going one, and people were upset with me. They were calling me a liar and crazy, and then thankfully Troy got on the podium and said the exact same thing right after they picked Cade, right next to Cade. But what he also went on to say is this is a guy who's not only a great basketball player, but he's a leader by nature. He's a connector. I think that how smart he is, um, I think how personable he is. It's very clear. We talk about all the time. Like I think it's one thing that's obvious about Cade is he was raised well.
Yeah.
Like he's very polite. He talks to everybody. Uh, he's he's just very personable, and that are the not only is he a really good basketball player and probably would have went number one based on that anyway, but I think what really put the cherry on top was like this group at that time needed a face. They needed a leader, and Mobley's a little more quiet. Jalen, I don't know him or haven't been around him, but obviously a little bit more um
Eccentric.
there you go. And Cade is just he embodies the people versus person, or the people versus player that Troy is very, very fond of, that quality. And um I don't know if people like, they probably see it. They see his personality shine through. They see what he does for the city. But I don't think until you're really around Cade do you understand just how good of a person he is.
Hmm.
Um and how smart he is in person. Like, it's not a facade. I just think that that's just how he was raised. I don't think
Yeah.
it's like he's putting on a show for the cameras, for the media. Like, I think that's genuinely who he is. And I've covered every game of his career. I've gotten to know him well, and I think I have a good barometer of like BS and not BS, and just the conversations I've had with him. Um, just everything seems genuine, and I think that goes a long way. And it's something that team did need at that time and still needs. And I think
Yeah.
that's a quality that for every jump shot he hits, every steal he makes, every defensive stop he does, like, that quality might be near the top if the Pistons end up being uh turning themselves back into legitimate contenders once again, and Cade's running the ship. I think that
Yeah.
could go a long way.
100%. I think all the time people view building a basketball team through the lens of making a trade in 2K, or pulling up the trade machine on ESPN, or just looking at teams on paper, right? And I think if you were to like, and I understand why on paper people would in a redraft would take an Evan Mobley, or even like a guy like a Franz Wagner who's played really good basketball. But the reality of it is, like, a basketball team and championship teams aren't built on paper, right? Like,
Right.
that doesn't showcase and display the depth that goes into, like, what makes a championship team. Like, you like the interpersonal dynamics, the cohesion that's needed to work together. Like, it's not just something that you can just, like, throw together and say, "All right, go win a championship." Like, you need, like, in order to make that work, you need a guy that can help lead you to the promised land. And, like, he's just from, like a character standpoint, just, very, very, very solid, especially at the age that he's at, for sure.
I agree.
Look,
And
yeah,
yeah, I've just thoroughly enjoyed getting to know him. I've enjoyed the conversations we've had, like, on and off the record. He's a good dude. And I think that, like I said, that's gonna go a long way for this organization, aside from like on the court, just the way he leads, the way he's perceived, the way he's respected. If they figure this thing out, I think that's gonna be one of the more underlying qualities of a successful basketball club.
yeah, for sure. Speaking of underlying stories of a successful basketball club, I think Isaiah Stewart could very well be that for the Pistons too.
Mhm.
And I know he's a guy that, people are like, "How dare you, James?" and seeing potential in Isaiah Stewart. And I know he's a guy that, like, I know that, I personally, like, as far as, like, he just, of everyone on this team, he embodies to me, like, what it means to be a Detroit Piston. Just like just all of the like character qualities, the traits, everything he is, like, as a person, the work ethic that he embodies, being a kid from, like, being a kid from New York, like the streets of New York, just scrappy, hungry, like, everything he brings to the team in that sense, to me, is a Detroit Piston. From your perspective, what do people not understand about Isaiah Stewart, and why does Troy Weaver love this guy so much?
I think for the reasons you said, that's another guy that I've gotten to know very well. Um, his he's not faking the funk. Like, he is on the court. He is mean. He's competitive. He doesn't like the person going up against him. Like, he's legit mean off the floor. And I've said it before. Like, he's a sweetheart of a human being. nice guy, personable, funny, like another guy that you could tell was raised well, uh, in terms of just like family values and knowing how to treat people. Like I think that is endearing to the Pistons. The work ethic, obviously, like people could say what they want. If you don't think Isaiah Stewart's gotten better every single year, like you're insane. I
You're
don't
just
care if
not
you
paying
call him.
attention.
Yeah, you're just not paying attention. I don't care that he's only shooting 33% from three. Well, he's taking 4 times as many threes. Um, he's playing a new position that he's never played. He's shooting at a volume he's never shot. He's showing stuff off the dribble. Like whether or not he's a starter long term, that's up for debate. But like, I'm not gonna put a cap on a guy who gets better every single year. Like, I'm not gonna say this is what he is. Like, if he cleans, uh, the closeout attacks look less clunky, start to look less clunky, it changes things. He's
Right.
shown stuff as a passer. I think he's a better defender in space. Playing alongside another big has helped him rebound even more, and he was already a good rebounder. Like I just am not putting a ceiling on a guy who gets better every single year and is playing a new position and is still not really having a drop off in his efficiency and his success. Um, I just like you said, we're both old enough to remember the. How old are you again?
I'm
28, 9,
25. I'm 25.
25. Okay, so
Mhm.
you vaguely remember the last title team.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, I would say there's a lot of Pistons fans that are like 21 to 18 that probably don't remember that, and that's why like they see Isaiah and they want to see the guys with the dunks that jump high and run fast and all that stuff. But again, every team needs an Isaiah Stewart. I'm not putting a cap on what he can become because he's gotten better each and every year. Um, I think that he's going to be a Swiss Army knife for this team for many, many years, whether that's as a starter or that's off the bench. He fits better. He fits the easiest next to all the other bigs. Like it's just he's always going to have a role on this team. He's the heart and soul I've mentioned before, and I think as long as Troy is here, Isaiah Stewart will be here.
Yeah.
I just
I
I would put good money on that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that as well. Every time I see someone say, "Yeah, Stewart's gonna be moved," I'm like, "Oh, so you don't watch the games. Okay, that makes sense."
Yeah, I see that stuff all the time. It's like obviously there's stuff I know that other people aren't privy to, and you can't like you don't relay all your information. But like there's certain things it's just like people tweet, and it's like I wish I could chime in on this, but I can't.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, dude, I feel the exact same way all the time. I'm just like, I just have to sometimes I'm just like, I'm just gonna put the phone away and I'm just gonna live my life and we're just gonna do that. But another interesting guy in the front court, James Wiseman. He was acquired, at the trade deadline, and he's been a polarizing player in the Pistons world ever since, he was acquired. Obviously, he was, when he was traded, one of the players that he was, traded for was a fan favorite in Sadiq Bey, especially in this rebuild.
Hmm.
And in addition with, with Wiseman, with how little he's played, thus far, he was unknown, right?
Yeah,
And I think through the first I think through the first 8 games, I would say that we've seen why James Wiseman went number 2. I think we've seen why James Wiseman has struggled since he's gotten to the league. I think we've seen a little bit of the highs, a little bit of the lows. What have been some of your thoughts on James Wiseman and his play? And what are some of the interesting stories that you foresee for the Pistons front court over the next year or so? Because, with some of the moves they've made, I mean, it is kind of a, acquire talent and figure it out later, right? Just
yeah,
because, Bagley and Wiseman don't exactly play together the most eloquently, right?
right. No,
Uh,
certainly. I think that I always just from afar, and I've tweeted it. You can find the tweets. Like I've kept stock in Wiseman.
mhm.
I just like the touch he has. I believe in the shot. I like the way he moves. It sounds crazy, but I like the way he moves up and down the floor.
Mhm.
Um, he's like there's just things that you can't teach that he has. And I look at him and I see a lot of his issues are things that you can teach or things that can come with more reps, whether that's um, uh, knowing when to kick out of the post up, setting screens, resetting screens, defensively, knowing when, like we saw last night, knowing when to go for the block, when not to, being in position,
Yep.
rebounding. Like there's just it's a lot of like stuff that it's not like necessarily like he doesn't know how to rebound. It's positioning and time clock situation and um certainly like things that with reps and increased minutes, which he's getting a ton of in Detroit, like you would expect whether or not it gets to a point where it's like, oh, like this is he's reached that potential we all saw. Um, to like, oh, he's starting to figure it out and he's a solid, serviceable NBA big man. Like I don't know what that range will be,
Right.
but certainly a lot of the stuff that he struggles with are just things that with time, with experience, with reps, will learn if he can do those things. It's not like stuff that's necessarily learned traits that are it's not like blistering speed like Russell Westbrook or things that he's like God-given abilities. It's stuff that you would expect with more time, you would see some type of improvement if this is a guy that really does have the potential many saw in him. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. And then like with the front court, I think it'll sort itself out. I think they're going to try to see what Duran and Wiseman look like next to one another. I think they can always trust that they have firm belief in Isaiah Stewart that if that doesn't work, they can put Stewart next to either one of them.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cream rise to the top. I know a lot of fans got invested in Jalen Duren, and rightfully so. He's for what he's doing at his age. He's probably going to be a problem for a long time. But with that said, we don't know yet. We
Right.
don't know what he can be. We don't know what Wiseman can be. So you give them both like there's minutes for both of them. Um, and if it doesn't work with them together, you sort it out and you figure out who's the one. And this isn't a team in a position not to just pass on guys that they really believe in.
Right.
They need as many shots at stars or star like players that they can get. And if they see
Especially
that
without those picks in the cupboard that we talked about earlier too.
exactly. So um yeah, I think for the trade, I think they looked at Sadiq. They were like, yeah, it's kind of like I think they looked at him like they looked at like Luke Kennard when they made the trade.
Yep.
Is he's a good player, but for where we are, he's probably better served on a better team where his role is more defined,
Yep.
where there's a pecking order in place, and um, they obviously Troy's talked about the need to add more size to the front court and going up against teams in the East. That it was an opportunity that they couldn't pass up. Obviously, they've gotten better defensively over the last month too.
Yeah.
Um, it's I think once people calm down, like after I saw a lot more like people in favor of the trade, but like the initial reaction to the trade was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where people saw a guy who was struggling in Golden State, and it's like, "Oh, he couldn't figure it out there, like, how can he," like, he's a bust, like, that's what people saw, but I think the truth is, like, you can even go to the Golden State Warriors and still struggle, like, the truth is with, when a guy doesn't play well out of the draft, it's not always just because the player isn't good. It's,
Yeah, takes
a lot of
time.
it yeah, a lot of it comes down to players take time, but also, players need a fit that's best for them. Like, for James Wiseman, what an ask to come in and be a championship level center, for a team that has genuine aspirations to try to build a dynasty. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah,
that's a
and he only played 3 college games. He just hadn't played a lot of
yeah,
basketball at a high level. Yeah, it's again, not everything is linear. And not to say that he'll end up being worth the number 2 pick here in Detroit, but we have no idea yet. So, it's definitely worth paying attention to. I think it was a move that made sense and has so far worked out for Detroit. Like I just wish caution people like no matter where the pick is, who the pick is, have patience. Like, I don't think Victor Wembanyama is going to come to wherever team he goes to and just like be an automatic all-star. Like I think some people do.
Right.
That he's the French league, Ligue 1 is not the NBA. It's probably the fifth, sixth best league in the world. Um, I know he plays in Euro Cup and he's shown stuff there. Like, of course, that's different, but like this is a different level of beast that he's going to face when he goes against Embiid and Giannis and these guys every night. Um,
And it's
I
not
just,
like he's gonna be getting one-on-one normal net matchups when he comes in either. Like
yeah,
he's gonna be on the scouting report from night one.
yeah. It's, I just caution people like rookies. There are very few rookies that are able to lay that type of impact right away. And if they are, most of them are on their way to the Hall of Fame. And that's not a title you should put on any young man or woman before they play a game. I caution people to just let things play out
Right.
and let them figure it out. It's never it's very rarely pretty from the start.
He has the potential to be great, but he's still a kid.
Yeah.
He's very
Move
much.
into a new country.
Mhm.
Um there's gonna be an adjustment for sure.
Yeah, he has the potential to be really good, but I mean, that's the thing. It's gonna take time.
Yep.
But, speaking of, I'm glad you brought that up because the draft is kind of where, I wanted to bring this conversation to next and kind of close the pod with. The Pistons are kind of in an interesting spot in the lottery sense because if they land number 1, I mean, it's an obvious decision. They get Victor Wembanyama, everything's grand, yada yada yada. But one of the scenarios that is being talked about quite a bit is if the Pistons land that second overall pick, because, from there, that's where it gets a little more interesting because the obvious number 2 prospect at this point is Scoot Henderson, who, for the G League Ignite looks like, a guy who is going to be really good. Like,
Mhm.
a prospect, that if Victor Wembanyama wasn't in this draft, Scoot Henderson would more than likely be the consensus number 1 guy. And
Yeah.
in a lot of other years, Scoot would probably be the number 1 guy. But,
Yep.
um, but for Detroit, obviously drafting, Cade and Ivy 2 years in a row, I think people would get to that point and go, "Well, why are we talking about drafting a guard yet again?"
Yeah.
But James, I think, it kinda gets back to what we were talking about with James Wiseman earlier in the Jalen Duren thing. It's like you believe that Duren can be that guy, like, you believe that Cade and Ivy can be those guys, but you gotta take the talent and figure the rest out later, right?
Yeah. I tend to agree. I think we all believe that Cade will reach the heights that many put on him, but
Mhm.
he still hasn't done it.
Right.
Same with JI. And if you have a chance to get a guy who I would say Scoot would probably go number one in every recent draft except Cade's draft.
Yep.
Um, if you have a chance to get that guy and then just figure it out, I think you got to take the best talent because you need as many shots as getting top 20 players as possible. You need two top 20 players to compete at a high level in this league.
Yeah.
And I think me and Sam talked about this exact scenario, and he would take Scoot, play it out for a year, and see what happens. And I think that's probably the right call. Um, but I also think, on the other hand, that there's why I think Scoot is the number two prospect, and it's probably just projecting. I think it's probably there's probably a little gap between 2 and 3. I think
Yep.
as we get closer to the draft, we're gonna hear chatter about Miller possibly going 2, depending on who gets 2. Um, and I think obviously Miller is a more seamless fit for this roster. I can't think of the last time the Pistons had a forward with that type of scoring upside on their
Right.
roster. And it
Has to be
obviously
Grant
would
Hill, right?
feels like it in terms of just like the 3 level scoring. It feels like it. Not to say that Miller will reach that or get there, but just projecting what he's done in college. I just think and even if it's not, I'm not saying if Detroit's number 2, you're going to hear conversations like that. I'm saying I think there's going to be a couple other teams, just because assuming again that Miller's not in any trouble and remains not in any trouble with the incident.
Right.
Um, but it's certainly, I think the Pistons are happy with picks 1 through 4. I don't think they'd be obviously they want one. They'd like two, but I think they'd be happy with 1 through 4. I mean 1 through 3 specifically. Again, assuming Miller doesn't get in any trouble and he passes kind of the good human being test. Um, it's a I think the Pistons are in good shape, just especially because of how much when Cade has played, the flashes he's shown as an all NBA potential guy, the flashes Jaden has shown and growth he's shown this season. I think they're in good. I think I think they're very interested to see what those two can do together. And then you add any other type of talent, like I think they feel good about it. So, and then even with that, maybe I wouldn't rule out them trading the pick. Like we talk about them needing another kind of more picks in the cupboard. Like if you here's a question for you: if the Pistons got number 2, would you trade that for Mikal Bridges and stuff?
Oh, I mean, I am very high on Mikal Bridges. I would very much have to pick up the phone if he was on the table.
It's
100%. I
worth
mean,
a
his
conversation. I just think they'll have options for sure. I don't think it's a foregone
right.
conclusion that they make the pick. I think they will get some nice offers for picks 2 or 3, to be honest with you.
Right, exactly. I mean, the reports from last year, I mean, it wasn't even a foregone conclusion, even after the Pistons drafted Jaden Ivey that he was gonna be coming back to Detroit. We knew that there were other teams interested and that there were things happening that night, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
it's I mean, that you never know what can happen, and we know Troy Weaver is certainly not afraid to pick up the phone and make some things happen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And, it's the Brandon Miller thing, that's certainly the one that I personally like, I know his game has a lot of upside. I'm very much just waiting out to see what happens on the legal aspect of things. Most certainly if he is cleared, he would most certainly be an interesting prospect. But another guy that and a name that you dropped around the trade deadline that could possibly make a return to Detroit this offseason is Jeremy Grant. Obviously, he made his return, the other night. Glad he got a round of applause and an ovation from the crowd. I know we've been a little bit harsh on Andre and on Blake and other players who have returned of late. So I'm glad Grant got a good ovation when he came back.
Yeah,
What?
no, it's cool to see. He's a
Yeah,
good another good dude who um I thought I mean he chose to come to Detroit. So
yeah,
that says a lot.
yeah, absolutely. And so what would let's say that were let's say that is like something on the table, what would have to happen in your eyes in order for that to be a possibility, and otherwise are there players that you personally have an eye on in the free agency market, or are looking at this offseason as potential targets for the Pistons?
Um I think for Jeremy, obviously he would want the max contract that Portland can offer him. They have not offered that yet, I don't
Right.
think. I know there was an offer on the table that he's just waiting till the summer. Um, if he doesn't get that big number that he wants and no other team goes there, like I think there's a world where Detroit offers a deal that is competitive with whoever else offers. I don't know who it will be, obviously, that we're predicting months ahead. And he comes back to Detroit. Like I just wouldn't rule it out. I believe that if Jeremy is goes into unrestricted free agency, which he will, that the Pistons will have conversations. Him and Troy are still very tight, even though
Mhm.
he was traded. Like they sat on the sideline the other on Monday night and talked for a long time. They are still very, very close. I just know that when that time comes, the Pistons will be reaching out to Jeremy Grant and seeing what it will take, and there will be conversations. There will be
Right.
conversations. I just wouldn't rule it out. And I said I wouldn't when I wrote it. I said I wouldn't rule it out because the relationship there is still very strong,
Right.
and not even just with Troy, but with the players, as you guys all saw him chatting with everybody. I just would not rule it out.
Yeah. It
Go ahead.
especially depending on, what happens in Portland as well. Like, they just
Yeah.
it depends on, what what path they want to take, because I know they want to build a contender around Dame, but it's like the question of, do they think Jeremy can be a part of that, right? I
Right,
feel like that would be a
exactly.
big piece of that.
Yeah, they'll have a price and all that stuff, and there will be conversations. And I think in terms of free agents, like I could see the Pistons going after Cam Johnson. Um, I still can't figure out about Kuzma. I can't decide if he's a Troy guy or not, but he
Mhm.
also probably will cost. There's a certain number I wouldn't pay Kuzma. I'm not sure. I feel like he'll get paid more than I'd be willing to.
Right.
And shout out to Flint, shout out to Kuzma. I respect the turnaround on the missed three last night. I love that. That's what we do in the 810 flair like
Mhm.
that. Um, yeah, I think this is just a prediction. I think there's going to be I think people are going to be available via trade this summer that it does like people don't expect. I think people are going to try to rearrange their teams. I think it's going
Yeah.
to be interesting.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know that
agree with
obviously I don't know that for sure, but I think there's going to be some guys available this summer.
Well, I mean, listen, man, when Kevin Durant is moved at the trade deadline, everything's on the table.
Yeah.
Like at that point, like when one of the greatest scorers in the history of basketball is just moved overnight by Matt Ishbia just taking over.
It's moving
Oh,
across the country overnight.
oh yeah, absolutely unreal. James, one last question for you.
Yeah.
Who you got? Like, what's your finals matchup going down the stretch? Who you liking right now? Like, what's the like? What would be? How about this? Like, I know it's super hard to predict what's going to happen.
Mhm.
If you could have it your way as a basketball fan, how would you want these playoffs to go down?
Nuggets, Bucks.
Ooh,
I
that would
want the
be
top
so
2
good.
teams. I want the top 2 teams to get there. I wanna see the international talent, be on that stage. I think it would just be very good for the game to have the Nuggets and Bucks, even if the NBA and TV ratings say otherwise.
Yeah,
But what I think will happen, Phoenix. I still believe in Boston. I think this is Boston's time. I just don't know if I can trust Middleton to be healthy, and I don't know if I can trust the Bucks to get through a whole playoff run without 100% Middleton. Um,
and he's not shooting the greatest right now
yeah,
either.
he's
That's
not. He's
yeah,
not. And I know they've been winning games, but the regular season's different. I just think Boston again, when you have 2 top 20 players, playoffs come in, you just need to get a bucket.
yeah.
And they got buckets. The Suns have the ultimate. We just need a bucket. 2 guys. I think at the end when the dust settles, barring injury, that those 2 teams are in the finals.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, watching Phoenix, like, it's only been a couple games, but Kevin Durant and Devin Booker together, good lord, man. I mean, I know Kevin Durant's played with superstars before, but that's just a whole other level of get me a bucket that is just from like a basketball fan perspective, it's unreal.
Yeah,
But James,
it's gonna be fun.
yeah, but James, seriously, man, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time. And you're a super busy guy. I know you have a lot going on, so just taking the time out of your schedule means a lot. And thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find your work, and where can people follow you at?
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, there's not many people who can get me to do this at 9 a.m. On the off day, so that says a lot about you and the work you've done. Check me
I
out on
appreciate that, man.
Twitter, JL Edwards III. If you're subscribed to The Athletic, you can go to the Pistons tab and check out all my stories. You can listen to the Bun and Cardigan show there. Yeah, I'm on Twitter, JL Edwards III, or just download the Athletic app. I'm sure there's a deal. If you click on one of my stories, you can subscribe, get a deal. And also, like, if you subscribe to a Piston story, like, you get access to the entire website. It's not just Piston stuff.
Right, it's worth the subscription in general. There's like so much good coverage on there. It's ridiculous.
I would say
But
the best in the world, but that's just me.
yeah, I would tend to agree, like, from an unbiased perspective, for pound. I mean, it's not every day that you just get to casually see, oh, James is just doing a story with Sham Sharania, and then oh, he's just hopping on a pod with Sam Vecine. Like that's like Avengers of Infinity Stone type
Yeah,
stuff right
and,
there,
and
man.
and maybe you're a Pistons fan, uh, Commanders fan, and a Giants fan. You can read all. There's beat writers for all those teams, and you can craft your app to only see those teams. Like it's for the diehard sports fan. So if you haven't checked out The Athletic yet, I would recommend doing so. Just go to my Twitter, click on any of my stories, and you can subscribe through there.
Yeah, most certainly. Be sure to do that and check out James's Twitter and all the work that he does. James, thanks again for being here, man. And thank you all so much for tuning in and listening to From Half Court. You can subscribe and catch NBA and Pistons coverage here each and every day. But also follow myself on Twitter at Sean Half Court for all the coverage, articles, and other things I have going on there. But that is going to do it for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Sure you subscribe.